There you
All
go.
right, all right. All right, guys, let me pray for us. Father, I want to thank you for this opportunity to get together with my brothers in Christ and to talk about matters that we're all working through and trying to figure out and trying to make sure that we do all we can for your glory, for the sake of the gospel. At the same time, being mindful of what people are thinking and feeling and going through at this time. I thank you for each church that is represented. Pray your blessings not only upon these pastors, but also staff members, but also upon the churches that they lead and the leadership that help support them and encourage them. And Father, we just want to praise you for all the many things you do for us and your faithfulness. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. And P.S. help Jonathan not to turn the electricity on at the wrong time. Amen. All right. For those that don't know, Jonathan is going to be helping his deacon and trustee turning on and off the power as they're working on some electricity. And we certainly want Jonathan to do the right thing at the right time. Maybe he'll reflect back on the minutes of the last few deacons meetings, and he will turn it on at a apt time. Okay, there you go. All right, guys, just a couple of things I want to mention to you. Chris and Derek have been working on promoting a couple of things. We have our first in-person Pastors Fellowship that we have planned for July 15th. Is that right, Chris? Derek? Okay. And that's going to be at Crosswoods Baptist Church. It'll be a lunch meeting. We'll have box lunches. I'm sorry?
It's the 14th.
14th, thank you. I'm sorry about that. And that's a Tuesday, is that right?
Yes.
Tuesday the 14th at Crosswoods over in Jessamine County. If you can't find Crosswoods, go to Southland's main campus and look to the left, and you'll see it. So I hope that you can join us for that. We will have opportunity if you choose to wear a mask. You can wear a mask. If you want a social distance, you can do that as well. We're going to set up in their gym there, so there'll be plenty of room for everybody. And we would ask you to let us know if you're coming to make sure that we have enough food. Typically, we would have it cooked and you would serve it sort of buffet style, but we'll do box lunches. So if you could RSVP for that July 4th in-person Pastors Fellowship, Staff Fellowship, certainly want to encourage you to do that. If you have staff members, if you're a pastor, you have staff members, those guys probably need to hang out together. There we go. Derek's got it up on his photo. Certainly encourage your staff to come as well, but just if you could RSVP so we know how many people to expect for that. Also, you should have seen posted, and I think we even have more details on this. Our next Leadership IQ will be August 25th, and Willie McLaurin, the Vice President at the Executive Committee, is going to be our guest, and he's going to be talking about basically being strategic in helping your church move forward. And the title's Chess or Checkers, and we're looking for our pastors to be experts at playing chess rather than checkers, to have an intentionality to their strategy moving forward. I think it's a great opportunity in light of all that's happening. By August, I think we're going to be talking about the school starting right at that time or right after that time. We're going to be talking about people's expectations of what you're doing changing. I think we'll see potentially, depending on circumstances, either less patience with social distancing and less patience with not having a full program, or we could continue to see caution. But no matter what, we can't plan based upon just circumstances we find ourselves in. We have to plan strategically. So I want to encourage you to mark that date and be a part of that leadership IQ. The other thing I want to say is that Chris sent out an email yesterday about Gospel to Every Home, which is a project the Kentucky Baptist Convention is promoting. We are in the process of trying to secure zip codes from Saturate USA so that we can get some free materials for them to help them with that project. If you didn't take the time to read that email, please go back and find it and read it and look at the link. There's some information about Gospel to Every Home there. We need churches to store the material in. Once we adopt a zip code, we're going to be shipped material. That material, depending on how many zip codes you have in a particular area, but for almost every zip code, it's going to be a pallet of information about the size of a refrigerator. We've already secured the zip codes for Bourbon County. Chris, help me out there. Bourbon and Harrison, and what was the third county?
Nicholas
County, because we have churches in those areas that are working together, hopefully to even do this project in the fall if circumstances allow. Dan's working hard on working with that group. We have secured a church to take the materials for Anderson County. Steve, thank you for being willing to do that. We've secured a church to take the material for Jessamine County, which is another Steve, and at Crosswoods. So Steve has volunteered Crosswoods. So we still have, need for churches in Clark, Fayette, Woodford. What am I forgetting there?
Scott.
Yeah, Scott, and we got several counties. And in Fayette County, we're going to need more than one church. There's no way. Well, I guess there is a way, but it's going to be highly unlikely one church will be able to store everything. So read that email, look at the information, and let us know. We're hoping to form a team in every region. So we'll divide our network up in regions and try to find a team to help get churches and people to be involved in the Gospel to Every Home movement. Chris, you want to add anything to that that would be helpful to them?
No, just read the email. Like you said, there's a lot of details on there, and especially on the link. And just let us know, like you said, for churches who are willing to house those pallets, we'll get those zip codes started and start that process. So,
all right. And so, guys, just let us know. I'm going to turn it over to Dan. Probably the majority of what we're going to be talking today is about small group reentry, but obviously we want to respond to any questions or things that you're seeing and hearing. I was on a national call yesterday talking about what's happening across the nation with church reentry. And to be honest with you, the numbers ring true to what we're hearing here, that we're not really behind anybody. We're not necessarily ahead of anybody. Everybody's facing the same questions, same struggles, and that's true across the board. It's not across denominational lines. So I saw statistics regarding all denominations, and then I saw statistics regarding Southern Baptist, and probably a couple that you may be interested in is that it appears that most churches have sort of settled in where they're going to be financially until maybe there can be larger groups coming in person. Most are running around 30 to 40% in some type of physical presence at a church service, with, to be honest with you, it being closer to 30 than it is 40 being a gracious number, being closer to the 30%. Churches are beginning to do the small group reentry. Children's Ministries So there's some key things happening across the nation right now. We're seeing the spike in cases, which partially is tied to testing, partially is tied to young people not showing proper restraint and social distancing and other things. And so the younger ones are the ones that are sort of pushing those numbers up. A few states are seeing increased hospitalization. Another statistic I'll share with you is that approximately 35% of people who regularly attend a Southern Baptist church say they're not coming back until there's a vaccine. And that may change. I think one of the dynamics when school reopens, things like that, people's attitudes will change a little bit. But those are not any different really than what we're hearing locally. So Dan, I want to turn it over to you. And if you want to add anything about Gospel Neighborhood Home, since you're working on that, feel free to do so. So yeah, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, David. I think that dealing with Gospel Neighborhood Home is a great opportunity, and the opportunity is now. So as soon as we can get that, we're using Bourbon County, and Mike is working with the folks down in Wolford County as sort of the project, the model to see how it works. We got about 7 churches in Bourbon County that are working together. So right now we're in the process of trying to develop a mapping program. That's the big and the most important. The first thing you got to do is get the mapping done, and then once we get it done, we'll be able to distribute the responsibilities to the different churches. Start off with the prayer walk. So I'm excited about it. Really excited about that. I think it's a real opportunity. I think that if we can get, I'm anxious to see what the fall brings after doing that. If we get into the fall with Bourbon County and see what kind of responses. We're hoping to end it with some sort of big event, and we're still working on that. I got some thoughts and ideas, so we're working towards that as well. So we're going to be the model, and hopefully we can glean from what we do in Bourbon County, what we did right, what we did wrong, and apply it to the other places as well. One of the reasons today, just wanted to get some of you guys together. I've been talking to a lot of you on the phone, and some of you now in person. And the questions now I hear, okay, we started church, we're back in, we are reentry, but now it seems like the key word is reengage. I'm hearing and reading many of the the experts, whatever that is, the experts are saying is that we're losing people that are not getting engaged. People are not engaged in church. It's started to show up online. Online presence is dropping. Churches of reentry. David used some percentages. Those are percentages I'm hearing. Anywhere from, depending on the size of the church, small churches out in the county, they may be running 70, 80%. Really small churches, but most churches are running somewhere around between the 20 to 50% range. And so I talked to some guys about re-engaging, some discipleship pastors. They're telling me that, for instance, Emmanuel, let me give you one. Emmanuel talked to 120 some parents for Children's Ministry. And that about 50% said they were ready to come back, and 50% said we want to wait a while. So that gives you an idea in that area with young adults and with their children. They also, a number of other churches have ran some surveys about coming back to small groups, and folks have been it's running in that 50% range as a general rule for people coming back. So how do we get people re-engaged? And the governor came out, and CDC and then the SBC came out with some guidelines for small groups. But I think it's really essential that we try to find a way to get people together. Are you any of you all doing small groups?
Doing small groups, but not Sunday school yet.
Okay.
We have our life groups that we're doing off campus. one of our life groups has decided to go back to doing it, but they're doing it in the backyard at their home.
And Dan, I'm sorry.
Crosswood has been doing Sunday school through Zoom for the last 7 weeks, something like that. Attendance has been around 90. Taken a little bit dip lately, but we are planning to start that back up in person July 5th. But we're also going to have the option of, and we're working to get the details figured out. We're going to also have it on Zoom for those who don't want to come back in person just yet.
Well, that's one of the recommendations is to continue your Zoom. If you're doing Zoom with your Sunday school class, and have it in the class with those who wish to attend, to keep people engaged and connected. That loss of connectedness is something that a lot of the guys are really concerned about, particularly those folks who may be fairly new to your church, and obviously those folks that are not in a small group, finding ways to maybe encourage them to be in a small group, find some way to have an event that would encourage them to come. That aspect of reconnecting people is the big concern right now, is how we get people reconnected. I had a conversation with a pastor the other day, and he was asking what I thought the pre or the post COVID-19 would look like with a vaccine. And I'm not a prophet, but I think our attendance initially will be lucky to get 80% getting back, even with the vaccine, because I think disconnectedness is setting in. Bigger churches are really seeing it on their numbers online. When they add their online numbers and their engaged numbers, their numbers are dropping. So find ways to engage people. So here's some ideas. Here's some thoughts. Have small groups during the week. Have your small group meet on campus in a large space during the week. That those can, especially your senior adult groups, and right now even your students and maybe even children before school starts back. Now, regarding children, my understanding is that Andy, our mayor or governor, is going to have something tonight. He's going to talk a little more about school, what it's going to look like reopening schools. So that's going to be the game changer for most of us with children's ministry. What the school does will have a lot to say about what we can do and what parents are willing to do. Outside, I heard somebody talk about outside. I'm going to talk to a number of churches that are doing some outside small group meetings, meeting at somebody's home. Because I'm doing some work over there, Emmanuel had a youth meeting in their pavilion, had 71 youth. It's outside, no mask. So, you really got to think ways to keep people engaged. Some are looking at putting up tents in parking lots that you can have a small group meet under before worship or after worship. That folks can get reconnected and back together. What's some ideas? What's some things you're thinking about doing, or what's some great challenges you see in bringing back, trying to get people re-engaged?
For us, it's workers.
Okay.
I mean, we've already started talking about nursery, some children's stuff, even youth, and we're having 60%, 70% dropout in workers right now.
Okay. I'm hearing that in children's ministry, especially youth and nursery as well. In fact, most of the churches that I've talked to haven't started nursery back. Is anybody started nursery back? Yeah, nursery is going to be that's going to be the most difficult one. And part of it is getting volunteers to work in the nursery and then being able to keep it sanitized with those kids chewing on everything. So that's definitely going to be a problem. What's some other things you're doing? Anybody?
Our
Porter started back live worship this past Sunday. We had done 4 Sunday nights, and even though it was Father's Day, we had about 43% attendance from where we were in February. We were really pleased with that. But we're also re-enlisting greeters and ushers because we're doing an extra worship, so we needed more volunteers for that. In the preschool area, they call and check in if they're bringing a preschooler. So we did provide that. We had very few preschoolers this past Sunday. The children went with their parents to worship. In mid-July, we are going to go back to our kids track where the kids will have a separate worship in the gym and be spaced out. We've got 2 groups that are meeting outside or under a tree. One of them is a college group. But we're still doing Zoom Sunday school. We plan to come back with all of our life groups at the same time, synchronized with what the school does in Fayette County. And right now that would be August 8th for us. I'm sorry, August 9th. That may change. You know, I've heard people say it may be after September they could do that, but it looks like that's when they're starting back. We estimate about a 50% return in our life groups, with the higher percentage with adults than preschool and children. So we're going to get, before we come back, we're going to get our life group leaders to do a survey on how many of their folks are actually coming back. That way, if we have a class that has, say, 70% coming back, we may have put them in a different room in order to social distance. But one thing, I'll say this, one thing that I'm seeing, churches that have a strong Sunday school or life group ministry, small group ministry, it looks to me they're seeing a higher percentage of people coming back to worship than those who don't. There's a lot of mega churches that are just running 17, 20% return, but churches that had a strong Sunday school life group ministry before this hit, you know, they've stayed connected. And I think everybody that was at our church at Porter this past Sunday, we kind of look around, almost all of them were people connected to a life group. So that just says something about the value, again, of small groups. That's kind of where we are.
That's that engaging, and that's why we're talking about re-engaging, because those folks that are not in a life group are definitely the ones that may not come back, and you may see in that 20% that you lose in attendance from pre-COVID versus post-COVID. I think that I encourage you to have your small group, life group, Sunday school teacher, whatever leader, whatever term you use, have them do a survey of their Sunday school classes. You need to go into the rooms and measure the rooms. You may find you can't have a class in that room, and so you got to figure an alternative. I know if you've got some large Sunday school classes, you may have to look at a different time than Sunday morning. It just is, because if you got a large Sunday school class, unless you've got some really extra large rooms at gymnasium or something where you can put them, that may be maybe what you have to do. But even with a regular size class, most of our classrooms are usually 60 to 80% full in the size of class you got. So they, you know, when you go back to social distancing, you know, you're going to have difficulty putting them in the class. So one of the things you need to do is have your Sunday school teachers, your leaders in your small groups, contact everybody in the group. My wife did that last week with her group. She had less than 50% interested in coming back. These are senior ladies. She probably had about 30% at that. And they want to come back to Sunday school before they want to come back to worship, is their comments. So, you know, that's an area where you really got to do some heavy work right now, trying to figure out where can I put these classes when they come back, make them comfortable, and feel them comfortable when they come back.
We're doing a hybrid version of Sunday school starting July the 5th. We're allowing our people to come back in person, and we're going to continue Zoom for each class. And so even our teachers, if they're not comfortable coming back for in-person worship, can Zoom into their class for people who come in person. That's what we're going to try starting July the 5th. We got about 90 to 95% attendance right now for Sunday school. 60% of them coming in person, the other 30, 35 being online. And we're averaging right at 60% worship attendance. So, and we're starting all of our children's stuff back July 5th, except for children's worship, and that'll start July 19th. And we're just having a check-in station for the kids, one entrance and one exit for them, and parents pick them up in a particular area, ask them all the little simple questions, and trying to really stay simple and not too complex. So that's how we'll see how that works. But so far, the things we've done at our church for worship have run smooth and had no issues.
Good, good. Well, you touched on some of the things they're really recommending to not forget, not to end your Zoom or your online presence in your Sunday school classes, your small groups. Continue those as you do with your worship. Continue to worship online as well. What's everybody else doing?
Dan, let me mention a couple of ideas that in this meeting, national Zoom meeting I was in yesterday. And I think I'm hearing this, but just to bring this idea out, that some groups that are meeting in person, small groups, simultaneously are doing their Zoom meeting then. So technically, even if they're not in the room, they're in the same meeting. So I think that's being implied, but I want to say that that's something that's happening. Also, some churches are finding that this is an opportunity to start new small groups via Zoom. So targeting the people who were not in small groups beforehand, but have re-engaged with worship, to try and target them with a new small group via Zoom. So there might be the opportunity to start some new classes. And you also want to understand this. If you have workers, volunteers that traditionally have worked in children's ministry, preschool ministry, student ministry, they are not necessarily connected to your adult small groups, and you've got to find a way to engage them. You're hoping they'll come back to volunteer, but if they step away from volunteering and they don't connect to a small group, you may lose them in a greater way than you want to. So I would encourage you to keep a list of those that were volunteering but are not engaged, and try to see if they're engaging at any level with your small group ministry, be it Zoom or otherwise. If they're missing it, then you need to consider starting a group for them, to reach out to them and stay connected to them in a small group. Many of them, not many, that's probably, but is a percentage of them that technically are really disconnected from your church when it comes to adult ministry, because a lot of people who do that are volunteering during a worship service, so they're not necessarily connected historically, consistently in the worship. And then many of them serve during the small group time, so they historically have not been connected to a small group unless they had a spouse that was connected or something like that. So that is a concern moving forward. These volunteers that are slow to return, how are we connecting to them? So you've got to be looking at that factor as well.
That's a great point. Anybody else?
Dan, we have had our students return. They returned last Wednesday to in-person worship. They had 125% attendance. They had extra. They had everyone that they normally do, and then had extra. I don't know how it will go tonight, how we'll see that fluctuate. They're still doing their small group aspect. on Zoom. They do theirs at 5 o'clock on Sunday nights. Our struggle has been our room capacities are small when we socially distance the rooms. So our sanctuary space becomes pretty much the only area that could host some of our life groups and our classes the way they are here on site. So we have tried to make a schedule out to where they could come different nights of the week. But we're running into scheduling problems with those group members being able to be there, especially our seniors. They want to be able to come out at one point, at one time, do their small group and then do their worship, and it be one trip out. So that's where we're struggling there on ours.
Yeah, spaces for you, I can see where that'd be a real issue. A neat thing I'm hearing from almost all the student ministries is that they're picking up new kids. Students are coming out to student events because they just want to be with their friends. And so the opportunity is there to reach some new students. I think by every ministry I've heard, student ministry told me they've got some new students there, and that's an awesome opportunity. In your case, you've got limited capacity. What I would say to guys, if you got space, look at your space and just if you got a gym, fellowship hall, if you got some of those big spaces, and here's the thing you got to do with them though. You need to clean those spaces out. Okay, many of us have got spaces, but they're full of stuff, and if you got all that stuff in there, that means all that stuff needs to be cleaned. So what I'm hearing some guys saying, we're in the process, I know 2 or 3 churches up there, we're in the process of just cleaning some rooms out. There's nothing in there but some chairs next to the wall and getting all the junk out of the classroom. That way we find we have more room for social distancing and easier to clean. But one of the things I'd encourage you to do is really look at your space. See, it may be a good time to do some spring cleaning. I know summer, but do some spring cleaning and just get rid of a lot of those things that are in those classrooms. And that'll help you with space as well.
And let me mention, over the last several days, I've had meetings with our several pastors, and also this came up in the meeting I was in yesterday. Of course, the meeting yesterday was across the nation, so every state has different guidelines. But basically in Kentucky, we're allowed to run 50% capacity, but we have very few churches technically that, because of the size of their worship area, that could even come close to 50% and respect social distancing. Now we're talking worship right now, but here's what seems to be a growing thought of some leaders. They're going to respect the group capacity for the room, but they're going to start having sections of their sanctuary that they practice social distancing. They have it marked out. And then they're going to have other sections of their worship center where people can sit as they please. And in one case, they've encouraged, they'll give a person something that they can set down on a couple of seats beside them so that nobody sits next to them. Even if it's not marked off, they have something that they can place in a seat either beside them, in front of them, whatever it is, to allow them to distance better. But we're hearing an increasing number of churches that are considering doing that because of the, I hate to say it, but some of the contradictions between what's allowed to happen in the real world and what is being sort of encouraged for the the churches to do. Our guidelines are maybe a little less stringent than they are in some other states, but I'm hearing guys in our network who are trying to figure out, because they do have people who, well, let me just say the church I was in Sunday, I found it, a little funny that everybody was practicing social distancing except about 8 ladies, one of which I know is at least 85 years old, because the guy preaching asked if there was anybody 85 years old in the room, and one of the ladies raised her hand, and they were all sitting in a row, all bunched up together. So apparently not every senior adult is practicing social distancing. Now, I probably should have taken a picture and sent it to their kids, and they probably would have been scolded and in serious trouble by the time they got home. But I didn't do that. I didn't post it on Facebook for any reason or any purpose. But there are questions about that, and it's related to the small groups as well, because all this stuff's connected. Where are you going to enforce strictly the rules, and where are you going to start being a little more lax? So many churches started following the bathroom guidelines. We still have a few churches apparently still following the one bathroom at a time guideline. But what we're finding is increasingly churches in the last week or two that we're doing that are starting to still have the postings up there, but they don't have a monitor. They're not monitoring it. And in fact, in one case, a pastor told me that somebody went through and removed all the signage about one person at a time when there wasn't a monitor there. And people weren't following it anyway, even with the monitor. I'm not sure you're going to tackle them as they go into the bathroom. That, there wasn't a whole lot of way to enforce it if they didn't want it enforced. So.
Yeah, I think most churches started, I believe, getting a little lax, especially with student ministry. Student ministry seems to be the place where they've been allowed probably more in a room than you're allowed, or kids together. Of course, kids are going to be kids, and it's sort of hard to, you're a teenager, you're invincible anyway, aren't you? And so, So what's some problems you guys are having?
David, Dan?
Yeah.
This is Tony Hancock. Let me kind of give you an update from Hillcrest. Our Sunday morning services are going fantastic. We're doing really, really well, and we seem to be all following the guidelines. We're dying to get back to Sunday school. Really want to do that. Don't know how to do it. When we draw circle 6 feet wide around our Sunday school rooms, we can get, for rooms that we had 14 in before, we can get 4 or 6 maybe. And if we get 6 in there, then they've got to be stacked in. So basically first in, last out, that kind of a thing. Can't be moving around. But a more pressing problem that we're dealing with, and this is one that breaks my heart. A number of our children have called our children's director and requested to ride the van. And as you know, our location is such that parents won't bring their children to church. And so we've got children sitting at home wanting to come. We've got them on Zoom, but they want to come back and be with us. And honest to goodness, we don't know how to do it. And what we've had to tell them is that we can't do that. The city buses right now are running 8 people per one of those big old buses, I'm told. And I don't see how the schools have any possibility of running a school bus if they maintain social distancing. What are you hearing on? We've got a van driver that's ready to go back, but again, that's the risk. So can you give me any feedback on that?
Tony, let me speak a little bit to that. I think that we don't know what the governor will say today, but the reports that have been coming out the last few days is this idea of the kids having to wear masks because they understand that they're not going to be able to practice social distancing, even if they do the alternate day type thing. It just, kids are going to be kids. And obviously you hit on another key, is that transportation. But in public transportation, airlines are not practicing social distancing on the airline. They are if there's only 10 people on the plane, let's say, but as they're getting fuller, they're not required to practice that. So I think what you want to do is sort of wait to hear what the governor says about schools. You would, at a minimum, you may have to limit how many are on the van and not maybe have a van full. And you would have to require masks and then before the next group got on. But I think that school is going to answer a lot of the questions because you have two issues. In one concern you have to have is, even though my history with picking kids up and bringing to church, the parents don't care enough to pick them up, but they love to fuss about how they were cared for once they're picked up. And I don't know that you have any parents that are like that.
No, we don't have any that are like that, David. All of ours are perfect.
Yeah,
it sounds like
that's,
you've been there before, though.
Yeah, and the thing is that you have to consider, even though waivers don't have any legal standing, a parent can sign them. All that does is mean they can't sue you, maybe, but they can sue on behalf of their child or something like that. So you need, that's the other issue when you're picking up kids where the parents' connection to your church is loose. That does give you another layer of concern.
Well, it has really been a heartbreaking thing from our standpoint to have to tell kids that call and want to come that, and we've tried to beg parents to bring them, and they just refuse. So I think we're still in a holding mode. And that was one of the things I hope to gain from this, if anybody has any experience with that. But what we're hearing rumors of coming from the governor's office is that the schools are going to go ahead and not practice social distancing, but require them to wear masks. And if they don't want to wear a mask, then they don't have to come. In our situation, that would not be nearly as easy to administer. So we're sort of in a wait and see mode, but it hurts us to not be able to reach out.
Let me say, I know of one particular church, I won't name it right now, that is planning on having an in-person vacation Bible school. And historically, they have provided transportation for their vacation Bible school. So Tony, anybody, as soon as I find out how that went, and I find out what type of model they used, I certainly will share it with you. Now, let me say that's what they told me yesterday, but they were presenting it to leadership last night. So the pastor may be telling me something else later this afternoon. But that was what's being told right now.
Yeah, keep me posted on that, because my fear is that we would wind up on the news.
Yeah, we'll just call you a Methodist church and let you end up on the news that way. Blame it on the Methodists.
Hey, Tony, I think I'd wait to see what the school's going. That's going to be our thing that we have to look at. How's the school going to translate? My grandkids ride school buses in Scott County, and they ride a long ways. So I'm curious. The thing I'm hearing is just what David mentioned. It is mask. When social distancing is not possible, you wear a mask. And I think that's what they're going to try to push. I can't imagine first and second graders wearing masks, but we'll see.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
On the mask thing, I had one of our parents, they got 4 kids. 2 of them are early elementary school. And she called me in a panic. She said, "What are we going to do?" And said my 4 kids, and was trying mask on and stuff. And they had been running around the house for about 30 minutes. And said her young son ran over to her daughter and said, "Well, your mask is prettier than my mask." And she said, "Well, okay, here, let's switch."
Yeah.
And I've had 5 teachers in church tell me that's their biggest fear, because there's so many dynamics of this. It's going to be unreal. And that's what one of my questions I was going to ask, if we're going to have social distancing and they can't do it in a school classroom, they can't ask us as a church to do it. But so if it's social distancing is not available, then they will. What you're saying is they're looking at mandatory masks. Is that correct?
That's what they're leaning towards. I haven't heard. That's not definitive.
Okay. I understand.
That's where they're leaning towards, and that if you can't have social distancing, then you got to have a mask.
Okay.
And so that'll be interesting to see.
If it helps any, my wife works in the administration at a private school here in town, and they the board is saying that they are going to mandate masks at all times. Even the lunch hour is going to be very strange, talking about kids having to sit 6 feet apart from one another to eat lunch. And I don't know how that's going to work out. Possibly even just having lunch in their rooms at their desks that are spaced 6 feet apart.
Yeah. And let's go back to Sunday school again quick. I don't want to get off that subject, and we'll have prayer time here shortly, but back to what Tony was bringing up about space. What are some of the alternatives are you all looking at or using instead of your Sunday school class room, the room itself? What are you doing?
Well, we're scheduling our gym. I've got 2 adult classes that are meeting in the gym on different nights, or Christian Life Center, whatever you want to call it. They're meeting there. We're doing Zoom. I think our next group that comes back will be our youth, and we're trying to decide whether it will be Sunday, Wednesday. Definitely not Sunday school. My Sunday school director and even our leadership have said absolutely not until we know what the schools are going to do, and then wait at least 30 days after school starts back to figure out if they pick the right program and what they're doing. So, yeah.
Daryl, what are you guys doing?
We are not having Sunday school right now. We got Zoom. Our Sunday school director is real cautious about that. He works at Toyota, and he thinks we're supposed to follow all the rules. And I suppose we should, but and we are trying to. We're having what I'm doing is Facebook Live. I'm doing the message early Sunday morning, 8 o'clock, and then we have a 9:30 service and 11 o'clock service. So I'm really tired when the day's done, but we're having just the Zoom. We are doing Vacation Bible School online. Our children's director is, I think she's got 45 students in it with the parents teaching it at home, but they're doing it on Zoom, and I don't know exactly how they're doing it, but they are doing it and getting some good reports back from that.
Good. So you're having in-person church on 2 services?
We have 2 services, and 9:30 and 11:15. For those Sunday school classes that are doing Zoom, that gives them 45 minutes to get to church. So it's worked out pretty good. Our normals we normally ran between 150, 170, and right now we're around 100.
That's good.
In both services.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else? Something you're doing unique, or maybe a way you're working Sunday school into space issues?
Let me mention one other thing related to Tony's dilemma and others. One of the ideas that's being used with these remote vacation Bible schools, these virtual Zoom, whatever you want to call them, is that they're putting together a packet of information and giving that out. I've also heard of children's workers now that are trying to even make a personal visit with children in their homes. Now that's unique when you don't have parental cooperation, but as long as the weather is nice, there's the potential of trying to at least satisfy that child's need to see and to be connected with someone who cares deeply for their spiritual well-being by some, home visits and practicing social distancing, taking some things by to them. So we are seeing that happening in many of the virtual VBSs and things like that. They're assuming most of them have a care package or whatever, and the family picks them up, and that's what they work through as they're doing the Zoom VBS.
Right. We're seeing both with VBS and Sunday school. When we met last week, was Chris with the children's leaders. That was one of the things that I was impressed by, how many of them were talking about actually taking things by the homes of the children and trying to keep that connection. Is that right, Chris?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, several of them had said form plans to take packages, doing at-home visits outside, just trying to find creative ways to keep those kids engaged. So a lot of good ideas were shared on that.
Also, we have churches that have deacons. The deacons are calling their select group every week to keep connected that way. Not all seniors and not all children, not everybody's on Zoom, but so they've actually, some of our churches have divided the membership listing along with regular attenders, and are reaching out to them at least every week or every other week, just to touch base, keep that connect. That's the big thing right now. We got to keep connected. So be creative. Think of ways that you can just stay connected with those folks that, especially those friends folks that maybe not in small groups. How do I connect with them? How do I catch them? Just watching you on YouTube or on Facebook Live is not as connective as hearing that word from somebody from the church. Just connecting. I know I've been doing calling with seniors, adults, and they just want to talk. They're just glad to talk to somebody. Any others? Well, David, you want to put us in small groups?
David, you're muted.
I was saying profound things I want you to know during that time. I'm going to put you in 2 small groups, and basically you'll get a invitation to accept. So we'll do that now. But thank you, Dan, for leading us. Thank you guys for being a part of it, and hope to see you in person on July 15th. Also look at the correspondence, the chat room. There's some links there to some of the upcoming things coming up. Bless you, brothers. We'll see you soon.